right, let's see. Do we have everyone? So we're missing Commissioner Repart. We'll give him one more moment. Joel, can you see?
Oh, I gotta move him too. Hold on. Here he comes.
Okay.
Thanks, Joel.
All right. Thank you. All right, Joel, am I good to call the meeting to order?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So commissioners, just a reminder, this is a scheduled special meeting. So it is a public meeting. So with that, at the end of the meeting, we'll make sure that if anyone wants to make public comment, we'll give them an opportunity to do that. Also wanted to let you know that we do have an individual with us, Kevin Curell, I think I'm saying his last name correctly, who will be providing interpretation services for this session. For those watching, if you do want to call in at the end of the session, you can call 311 and hit number 1, and we'll be put in the queue. So with that, commissioners, we have 3 briefings and updates before us today as a part of our fiscal year 2021 mid-year performance management update. So I see our city manager is on, so I'll turn to him to just provide us with a few opening remarks, and then we'll get started with the first presentation. I see our deputy chief as well as our chief with us today, and I believe they'll be leading us through the first update. So city manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, commissioners, for returning. And I'll just turn it over to the chief and have them get started with their briefing, and then we and the deputy chief will take us through the presentation. And then following, we'll have remarks as well from our oversight office by Brandon Davis.
Great, thanks. Chief, before you start real quick, city clerk, do we need to call roll?
No, this is.
Okay.
We're doing this as kind of a continuation this morning, but with public comment.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Sorry about that, Chief. I'll turn it over to you now. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Mayor and Commissioners and City Manager, for the opportunity to give you an update where we're at with our strategic plan. As you know, over the last year, we have been developing and implementing the strategic plan. It's been a collaborative effort where we received input from the Commission, direction from the city manager, and we've listened to the community on putting this plan together. I want to thank the city manager for allowing other city departments to assist us in putting this plan together, and just putting it together is not enough, making sure we're on track doing what we're said we're going to do. So Miss Allison Sutter from Sustainability and Performance Management was a big part of it. Stacy Stow from Equity and Engagement, Patty Cotto from Diversity and Inclusion, working with Josh Naramore, Mobility and Traffic Safety, Mr. Davis, Brandon Davis from OPA, and Becky Jo Glover from Customer Service and Innovation. They've all been a part of this. The fire department assisted us in putting this plan together, and we're in the process of implementing it. So it's been a big collaborative effort, and you're going to hear that throughout our presentation, that this plan is done in collaboration. It's not a standalone police department initiative. We're working with many different entities to make sure we're having a successful plan, including like the Safe Task Force, who we partnered with to have a gun buyback program, which you'll hear more about as the presentation is given. But with that said, I've always said, and I've mentioned it many times, it's going to be a challenge for us to do it with the resources that we have available. We have 297 sworn officers. We've been fortunate enough to add civilian employees. I'll mention our wellness person, also our victim advocate, and subpoena services. So we've added some civilian, but we have not added in our sworn personnel, and it's imperative that we keep that number at 297 to be able to accomplish this goal. I am confident with the men and women of the department that we'll be able to do that. And from that number of 297, we've actually created other programs within the department, like the homeless outreach team that you'll hear about. Our plan to move toward neighborhood-based policing, mental health initiative team that we're hoping to put together, along with adding mental health professionals along with the group. So there's a lot of different things that we're doing with the plan that will require a lot of collaboration and us being able to move it forward. We've also, I want to mention that last year was unprecedented, not just with COVID, but the level of violence that we've seen in the city. You're going to hear about how what we've done and the things that we're looking to do and what our numbers look like right now today. And I think this plan has had an impact on the level of violence that has occurred. For instance, from September to December of last year, over 100 illegal guns were taken off the street involved in illegal activity, with many subjects being charged with those crimes. I do look at that as preventative. With that said, our officers use a great deal of discretion and restraint in doing that. Not one single use of force was recorded by our officers in 2020 where firearms was involved by the officers. That goes to the level of training that we have within our department that we're constantly being recognized, not only in the state, but throughout the country. We must maintain that scenario-based training that we are equipping our officers to go out and make the right decision and do the right thing at all times. We're also looking at other initiatives this year as far as training. We would have CIT training, crisis intervention training. We had an example just this past weekend where a subject was experiencing a severe mental health crisis, required a great deal of personnel, but we were able to resolve that situation of an armed subject and take him into custody and get him the mental health or the assistance that he needed. We are constantly evaluating the type of training we're getting. We're also looking at ABLE training, which is active bystandership for law enforcement. This training prepares officers to successfully intervene to prevent harm and to create a law enforcement culture that supports peer intervention. So those are just some of the things that we're looking to do moving forward. If I could have the first slide up, please. And thank you. With any plan, I firmly believe you need direction. And what we did, we created values, with service being the first one. Every police officer I've ever talked to or listened to have said that they want to serve the community. Equity must be embedded into everything that we do, where we're looking at it through an equity lens. And then integrity, we're doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And accountability, we're holding officers accountable. There should be a vision, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say that it's a lofty one, but we will continue to work to reach this vision. But in partnership with the community, we will become the safest and we will become the safest mid-sized city and the most trusted police department in the United States. We have to constantly work toward that. And our mission is to protect property and life. With that, I'm turning it over to Deputy Chief Reifenberg, who will take us through the plan, and then I'll have some closing comments.
Hi, thank you, Chief Payne. Actually, I want to thank everybody for your time this afternoon. My name is Deputy Chief Kristen Rogers, and I'm the Deputy Chief over administration here at the GRPD. I am excited to provide this update for our department's strategic plan. And to review the GR strategic plan, I'd just like to let everybody know that this is a 3-year plan. We just started aligning our work aligning to the plan in August of 2020. Thus, we are only 5 months into our strategic plan. Our strategic plan has 3 main priorities. Of course, the first is safety. Our desired outcome is to provide professional neighborhood policing services to prevent crime, enhance trust, and ensure safety for all. Our second priority is innovation. We're going to leverage partnerships with technology to improve services, decrease crime, and increase efficiency. Last priority is engagement. We will build community trust and mutual understanding by enhancing community engagement strategies within the framework of our neighborhood-based policing. Next slide, please. A closer look at our 9 objectives, and understand that we have the 3 priorities. Within these 3 priorities are 9 objectives, with each priority encompassing 3 of them. And understand them within these objectives, there are numerous strategies and action steps that we're taking. As well, we have metrics which will measure how well we are achieving our objectives and our desired outcomes. For safety, the 3 priorities, or the 3 objectives, would be a positive presence in the neighborhoods, respond to police calls of service, engage in collaborative problem-solving initiative with our community. Of course, number 2 is a crime reduction team, which I will talk about further. Number 3, engage with the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability and community stakeholders to pursue data-driven, evidence-based strategies that address the root causes of and help to reduce crime and police-related emergencies. Next is going to be innovation. We want to explore alternative responses for certain calls that we go to, which I'll talk about. We partner with the Kent County Prosecutor's Office and the city's Office of Oversight and Public Accountability to coordinate victim advocacy and restorative justice programs. Number 6, we'd like to leverage technology opportunities, of course, to decrease crime and increase efficiency while ensuring objective and constitutional use and accountability. Our last 3 objectives is with engagement. We want to align engagement with neighborhood-based policing, which I'll talk more about. Next one's going to be partner and collaborate with the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability and Equity and Engagement and community stakeholders to increase community trust through transparency and accountability while elevating the community's voice in police operations. And number 9, attract and hire and retain high-performance employees who embrace the guardian mentality and neighborhood-based policing philosophy. Of course, we want to always keep ourselves on track, and we are constantly evaluating ourselves as an agency. We want to know, is what we are doing working? So we are presenting quarterly on updates on the progress of the strategic plan and implementation. We want to utilize data-driven enforcement and proactive strategies to affect violent crime. And to note, we do have a decrease in violent crime from this time last year. So from January till today last year, we had 7 homicides. And from January till this date, the 23rd of 2021, we've had 1 within our city. And of course, our goal would be to have none. We want to continue to reimagine policing and embrace a transformative plan that reflects the desires of the community, along with the proven techniques, and ensure a safe city. And we want to accomplish all of the above while remaining transparent through the accurate and timely updates on the metric or the police metric dashboard, which again, I'll talk more about. This is just an overall plan summary just to show you some of the metrics with the program that we're using. Actions with disruption that have occurred thus far in our 5 months of our plan have been centered around any financial concerns, lack of or change in personnel, and COVID-19 restrictions. Overall, the GRPD is ahead of schedule with 89% of action steps completed or on track for completion. In order to move forward with the strategic plan and obtain a successful implementation, GRPD will have to, at the very least, maintain its current staffing levels and financial resources. So I'm going to start into priority 1, so safety. This is breaking down each priority. So any safety action steps experiencing disruption through the process has been, again, due to personal constraints and COVID-19. Despite these issues, 21% of the action steps have been completed and 71.43% remain on track. Highlights of our safety priority include collaboration with stakeholders on a community-based violence reduction plan. An RFP has been received and closed, to which Brandon Davis from the OPA office will further explain at the end of this presentation. We had a successful execution of a gun buyback program. On 2 different occasions, we held them in the city, and the program resulted in the recovery of over 200 guns. In late summer and early fall of 2020, the department conducted door-to-door engagement in order to seek the community's input and alleviate concerns regarding increased violence and police presence in neighborhoods. And then after seeking this door-to-door engagement And in talking with the person or the residents that we talked to, they advised that they did want us in their community. They did want us there working to reduce the violence and crime that's going on in their neighborhoods. So as a result of that feedback, the department conducted several safe neighborhood operations. These operations included additional personnel being assigned to neighborhoods that were experiencing high levels of violence. The personnel were provided accurate intelligence and specific directives, and these deployments resulted in multiple arrests, seized firearms, as well as 0 internal affairs complaints. To continue some of the highlights, with the departmental leadership, we had to reimagine things. We reimagined agency structure to create a special operations division. Within this special operations division, it includes our crime reduction focus. It includes what would be our SWAT team or SRT. It also includes the HOT team, K9, traffic unit, and code enforcement. They are going to be tasked with data-driven intel and strategies to address violent crime in an equitable manner. And again, that's the crime reduction team that's within the special operations division. They will work with the investigative division to identify specific violent offenders who are victimizing our community and the people that are living within. We transitioned a sergeant from a different area that was going to work to identify reports of similar motive and or suspect to ensure that there's proper sharing of the intelligence data amongst the police units for enforcement and or other needed interventions such as mental health or housing. And then lastly, we also transitioned an officer into a gang intelligence position. This was created to work in unison with all the above mentioned personnel. This position will assist with violent offenders, work to prevent future gang violence in hopes of interrupting the recruiting of our youth into this lifestyle. And just so we understand that when we are creating other areas, we are trying to reimagine. So we are moving personnel from one job into another, which is how we're constructing that. So moving forward to innovation, this would be our second priority. Many of the innovation action steps actually have yet to begin and are going to be upcoming. Some are on hold due to reevaluating due to financial resources and the need for city commission approval. However, the remaining action steps during the quarter remain on track for completion. Next. Highlights in the innovation priority include expansion of the HOT team. GRPD's commitment to this team is currently 2 officers and soon to be 3, and a supervising sergeant. On this team, the HOT team, they work with fire, mental health professionals, and social service agencies. The sergeant of that team was also working within that unit to create an additional mental and behavioral health team that is, we're really excited that is up and coming. We've also created a partnership with the Mobile Health and Crisis Response Team, which is actually a Network 180 team. They have partnered with us to respond to a person that might be experiencing suicidal ideations and self-harm, behavior that is out of control or are in another state of crisis. The Mobile Crisis Response Team will also follow up with people or with persons that might be involved in their response within 7 days of responding. We've had multiple listening sessions that were, skipped. Also, we have additional planned CIT, which is a crisis intervention training for more and hopefully all of our GRPD officers. We've had multiple listening sessions were held to alleviate the community's, to elevate the community's voice in police operations, particularly as it relates to technology. We'll continue to work with the city and stakeholders and community to come together and to have continued conversations about technology and policing and crime prevention. Finally, we implemented changes to departmental policy regarding use of force, and we've trained all of our personnel. And this was done in abundance of caution and acknowledgement of best practices. The GRPD amended its use of force policies to include recommendations from the 8 Can't Wait campaign. However, I would like to note that GRPD has never allowed or endorsed any of those tactics. Moving on to innovation, this is a major shift that we're going to talk about as services. This is something that GRPD has provided since the almost 25 years that I've been here, and I'm sure longer. And this is an example of just a really innovative idea idea and partnering with another city entity. I would like to thank in advance Josh Narramore and Mobile GR Parking Services for their partnership in this endeavor. And I'm going to go ahead and let him explain, as I think his slides go into more detail.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Rogers. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm excited to be here to talk about a collaboration that our department has had with GRPD, the Department of Law, and the Treasurer's Office over the last few months to really go through, and I would just want to share some of the data behind some of the parking enforcement and talk about some recommendations that we're building into the fiscal year 22 budget. So just a quick high-level overview of the current parking enforcement work group that we have within the Mobile GR department. There's 10 currently authorized full-time equivalent positions for parking violations checkers. 7 of those are currently filled. The other 3 have been remained vacant as we had navigated through some of the budget shortfall during COVID. And there is 1 parking enforcement supervisor. This work group focuses almost exclusively on meter infraction tickets, neighborhood business district parking infractions, residential parking permits, and safety violations like blocking a crosswalk and a fire hydrant. So currently, this work group does not issue seasonal parking tickets. And as Deputy Chief Rogers mentioned previously, all of our parking enforcement authority is derived from this specific reference to the city code. And the Department of Law amended this in partnership with our department and GRPD in June of 2019 to expand the ability for non-sworn individuals to be able to write parking tickets. And currently, we work a variety of staggered shifts to cover Monday through Saturday hours from 7:30 to 6:30 p.m. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, I just want to go through and hit some highlights on some of the actual data behind this. So as I mentioned, so seasonal parking restrictions are really one of the largest line items that the GRPD handles for parking enforcement. So those current restrictions are from November 1st through April 1st, and it's from 1 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. Just to give you an example of the non-emergency dispatch calls related or parking complaints. So in fiscal year 19, it was about 4,700. And then in fiscal year 20, this dropped to a little less than 3,400. The peak call volume is usually first thing in the morning, and the highest call volume is Tuesday through Saturday. Sunday has by far the lowest call volume. And the current parking enforcement approach is reactive and not proactive. So it's really on a complaint-based response. Summarizing and just showing the entirety of the totality of parking tickets that are issued by type, there's more than 50 plus different violation types that are listed in the city code. In fiscal year 2019, about 92,000 tickets were issued, and then this dropped significantly in fiscal year 20 to just over 73,000. But by far, the highest category of tickets that are issued regularly are those in the downtown area for expired parking meters. But seasonal parking is the 3rd highest violation type. And with those ordinance changes in 2019, parking enforcement staff can write all parking violations. Next, on this slide, this is actually looking at all of the parking tickets that are issued across all staff within the city based on day and a month. As you can see, in the orange line in the upper left hand and looking at tickets issued by month, there was a significant drop off during the early days of the pandemic and the shutdown because we were only focused only on doing safety violations. But if you look at this, it really the way that tickets are issued by month, it really varies greatly year over year. And a lot of this is probably dealing with more of the weather. And Monday through Friday is the highest volume, but that is really reflective of when the majority of current non-sworn parking enforcement staff are working. This data, as I mentioned, includes all tickets issued by the police department, our department, and police volunteers. And then I referenced that parking enforcement was reduced from March 26th through July 6th. And just really honing in very specifically on seasonal parking tickets. Seasonal parking tickets issued, fiscal year 2019 was a heavier snow season compared to fiscal year 20. So there were almost twice as many tickets that were issued during that season. So really it depends on the weather, which we can't necessarily be the best predictor of, but we're trying to be more responsive to that. And that will come into some of the recommendations. On the next slide, please. So just very preliminarily, after this collaborative effort, we're recommending that all parking enforcement responsibilities would transition and all of the GRPD dispatch calls would transition to Mobile GR starting July 1st with the next fiscal year. And then specifically that we would assume odd and even parking enforcement, and that we would augment current staff with some seasonal staff just to be able to better understand during the first snow season. And really, I think I want to stress this is the biggest importance. As part of this transition, we're also going to strike a balance to being proactive and reactive with parking enforcement, and really trying to bolster our efforts to emphasize education and awareness, specifically around odd and even and other types of safety violations. And then lastly, we continue to work on reviewing abandoned vehicles and towing of vehicles exclusively on city parking facilities. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Deputy Chief Rogers. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Moving forward to our priority 3, which is engagement. Again, just to show that we are 43.75% of the engagement action steps remain on track, though COVID-19 has been a significant disruption in this category. Highlights for the community engagement include implementation of the Police Chiefs Advisory Team, which we call PCAT. This PCAT began as a weekly meeting, but now meets bi-weekly. The team's feedback and it's been invaluable to Chief Payne and has created a significant bridge between the department and community members. Continuing, the Communities Engagement Unit launched a new website, which I would hope that everybody would go and look at. It is awesome, but it is called Join GRPD. This is for recruiting and to improve our recruiting efforts. They also developed a more robust and diverse recruiting team. The GR Communications Center successfully completed its CALIA accreditation and will receive official recognition in March of 2021, as we also transitioned to the new 800 megahertz radio system. The department is in the process of hiring a civilian PIO and a civilian chief of staff. Both processes have taken longer than expected due to circumstances out of our control. Despite COVID-19, GRPD was able to participate in at least 135 community events in 2020. External IAU complaints have dropped for the 4th consecutive year, and there's been teams of objective leads have been formed within the department to collaborate with other city offices and community leaders regarding accountability, training, engagement, and recruiting. Moving forward to our metrics, we are committed to providing accurate and timely data to the city's police metric dashboard. This has only been able to be accomplished in collaboration with several of the other city departments. Again, this can be found through the city's website and onto the police department's website. The existing categories include accountability, budget, community engagement, crime statistics, criminal charge statistics, and staffing. We have received a lot of feedback on the metrics, and as a result, we've added action steps under this strategy to ensure that we are continuing to identify additional data for the dashboard and the community and what the community would like to see moving forward. We hold our commanders accountable to utilize the data regarding community sentiment through community surveys to consistently evaluate and improve police services while ensuring equity. And again, these metrics are updated with information from the GRPD's data collection system or our reporting system. And then this is shared with the leads of the digital and data strategist that's for the city that helps us update the website. Next slide, please. This is just to show as you go into one of the metrics and you can go into further details. It's really awesome to be able to go in and read and really understand all the information. And again, one thing we have to understand is that these numbers are just a snippet of one day of data in the city. Keep in mind that this data may and most likely will change. This changes due to investigations, investigators' closing of cases, victim statuses, and there could always be more. Also, the metric dashboard counts the number of incidents and not the victims of an incident, just so we have an understanding. Moving ahead. There have been some disruptors, of course, in 2020. Just to go over, of course, COVID-19, the plan to collaborate with a private company to reimagine property damage traffic crashes has been disrupted due to the company no longer wanting to come to Michigan. But despite this change, GRPD is working with another entity, and we continue researching the possibilities. And we're actually in the working kind of planning stages. And hopefully in about 4 weeks, we will be able to roll out our new traffic crash reporting. So we were super excited about that. And then our research and planning continues around whether it is best case practice to redeploy sworn personnel by reimagining responses to alarms and quality of life issues. And some of this, working through the strategic plan, we've actually found that many agencies are moving away from different responses or not responding to alarms, but really doing almost like a two-pronged process in their deployment. So again, as we work through the strategic plan, we need to really look at what is going to work and what is going to work for our community. If we make, or as we make changes, these changes are going to require an extensive amount of public education prior to these implementations. The department looks forward to the hiring of a non-sworn PIO to help in this endeavor. The Grand Rapids strategic plan was based on its current financial resources and personnel strength. Any changes to these figures would require altering of the strategic plan. We want to talk about moving forward. We're so excited as we hopefully go through this COVID-19 to really re-engage with the community as the restrictions are lifted. This includes improving trust with residents and recruiting within our neighborhoods. We are transitioning from the community policing to the neighborhood-based policing model beginning March of 2021. Our intention is to have an officer in each beat of the city to work collaboratively with the community members and stakeholders to utilize a partnership approach to crime reduction. We want to continue to research the ways we can leverage technology to improve efficiency and redeploy personnel. Research will include engagement with the community and a dedication to lifting their voices regarding policing operations. Of course, we continue the transition of parking enforcement responsibilities to mobile GR. We continue to look for additional partnerships. One has come to light with a local hospital inquiring about partnering with GRPD and paying for 2 officers at their location. We look forward to having these continued conversations and bringing forward resolutions on how this may work. Again, our vision, in partnership with our community, we will become the safest mid-sized city and the most trusted police department in the United States. Again, I would like to thank you for your time, and I would like to now turn this presentation back over to Chief Payne.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Kristen Rogers. I apologize for that introduction. But as you can see, we've done a lot with this plan in the 5 short months, putting it together, or prior to that, putting it together and now implementing it. It's a good plan. I believe it will serve the community well in our attempts to build trust within the community and to make the community a safer place. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Brandon Davis from Office of Oversight and Public Accountability for an update on the RFP that was submitted. Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Chief, and good afternoon to everyone else. I will be providing you with the update regarding the evidence-based violence reduction and intervention RFP that was released. As you know, this RFP was released and based on the direction of the city manager and feedback that was given by City Commission and community. Next slide, please. When we talk about this RFP, the city made a commitment to make an investment of $75,000 annually with renewal options for 2 years, resulting in a total investment of $225,000. We were seeking a lead agency, and we were looking for a lead agency that would fully implement, supervise, and facilitate this evidence-based community violence reduction and intervention program, and would also seek additional funding as needed. One of the important factors for this was that there was a connection to neighborhoods. So we were looking for a lead agency that had existing relationships with Grand Rapids neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods of focus. Next slide. At this point, I want to turn it over to Cynthia Scoten, who's the city's purchasing agent, and she walked us through this process, and she'll tell you about the request for proposals process.
Hello. So on December 11th of 2020, I released an RFP where we were seeking a leading agency to implement an evidence-based community violence reduction and intervention program. It was posted on the city's website, per purchasing guidelines. We not only had it on the purchasing page, but we also added it to the OPA page. And we shared it with community groups and partners. And then we also shared it with local media, and we put it on social media. The RFP's specifications required that the program model be based on one of the following: either cure violence, cease fire, advance peace, NOLA for life, or an evidence-based model with similar outcomes. The deadline for the submissions was extended to January 21 of 2021 from the original date of January 15, 2021, and that was due to the holidays. Next slide, please. And so the city received 3 responses on the RFP. One response was disqualified when it became clear right away that we were missing the required information. The RFP Review Committee consisted of internal and external partners. Chris Becker, he is the Kent County Prosecutor. Connie Bohach, she's the Managing Director of Community Service. Brandon Davis, the Director of Oversight and Public Accountability. Anita Hitchcock, our City Attorney. Kirby Kellingham, he's with Family Outreach Center, and he also is co-chair of the SAFE Task Force. John Lehman, our Fire Chief. Eric Payne, our Police Chief. Stacy Stout, our Director of Equity and Engagement. Next slide, please. And so the 2 remaining requests for proposals, submission 1 was basically a train the trainer approach. It was training service providers regarding the implementation of a cognitive restructuring and resocialization program. This program incorporated psychoanalytical approaches, psychodrama, cognitive behavioral therapy, Gestalt, empowerment approach, narrative therapy, and computer programming concepts. The proposal focuses on providing services of youth ages 13 to 21. However, there was an adult version that was available. Submission 2 proposed a de-violence, the destructive thinking model for our youth. This program created a proactive and positive mindset while teaching youth how to create their own virtual reality simulations. It focused on youth ages 11 to 17 who have been exposed to trauma of community violence and systematically have been imprisoned to a lifestyle that breeds violence. The program offered 8 hours of training to cohorts of 30 students per session. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Cindy. So the committee believes that both projects could be impactful in concert with other efforts, and we recommend consideration of funding through other mechanisms. However, this RFP focused on the creation of an evidence-based program that will engage in direct, like street-level community-centered violence intervention. And as you just heard, the bids that were submitted did not focus on a street-level direct violence intervention model, and therefore those bids were not awarded. But because we saw value in those bids and think that they should be considered further, OPA and purchasing met with the proposers to inform them about other funding streams that could be considered for those programs, including but not limited to seeking funding through the SAFE Task Force. Next slide, please. So that takes us to future considerations. So where do we go from here? What do we do based off of the fact that neither bid was awarded? Well, one option is to re-release the RFP, and we could maintain those specifications that allow for submissions based on a broad range of factors, based on evidence-based intervention models. And we will maintain the requirement that the lead agency must secure funding to cover the expenses exceeding the annual $75,000 that will be provided by the city. Another option is to contract directly with Cure Violence or another evidence-based intervention model. And in speaking with our purchasing agent, we believe that direct contracting would be appropriate based on purchasing guidelines, based on the fact that these programs are unique and their models are unique. So they're a direct source type of service, but we would contract directly with them or facilitate the contracting with a lead agency. And then we would also release an RFP or a request for qualifications for a lead agency to implement that chosen model. And from there, it's important to note that this model would require additional upfront investment by the city or from its partners. But based on conversations that I've had with city manager, there are individuals who have indicated that if we were to select the evidence-based intervention model, they would be interested in helping to support that. So we do not see funding as a barrier to following option 2. Next slide, please. So our next steps, well, OPA has already contacted Cure Violence and requested confirmation regarding the current applicability of its 2019 analysis and cost structure. Many of you may recall that back in 2019, Cure Violence did do an analysis for the city regarding implementing their programming in the city of Grand Rapids and what that would look like and what it would cost. So we've contacted them regarding that. We've also reached out and requested information from NOLA for Life, Advanced Peace, and Operation Ceasefire regarding their services offered and their cost structure. So the next steps after we receive that information is that the RFP review team will meet, review that information, and then make a recommendation to the city manager regarding which options we should pursue. Additionally, OPA will provide continual updates as additional information becomes available. Next slide, please. Just before we turn to questions, I think in the interest of accountability and transparency, it's important that I provide you all with this additional update. As many of you may know, the Civilian Appeal Board has been received some delays in reviewing appeals based off of COVID-19 and the pandemic that we are currently experiencing. The Civilian Appeals Board is a quasi-judicial board. As a result of being a quasi-judicial board and the laws and policies that govern the board and also labor contracts that are included in that, there are laws regarding some confidential information that the Civilian Appeals Board is able to review. One of those rules or one of those agreements require that some of that documentation be reviewed on city property. Given the COVID-19 situation and the pandemic that we experienced, there were delays with the ability for CAP members to review some of that information on city property. Additionally, with the recent arbitration decisions and some advice of counsel as it relates to training required by CAP, some of that training includes use of force training. As many of you may know, the use of force training is a direct hands-on training that's given by our Grand Rapids Police Department, but that training does require that it's in person. There is not an opportunity to give that training in a virtual environment. Based on the advice of counsel, is our understanding that that training needs to be given to all of the CAB members before they are able to make decisions on some of those cases. 4 of the 6 members of the Civilian Appeals Board are new and still need to go through that training. This training was originally scheduled in December and then rescheduled based off of an uptick in COVID. So based off of all of those factors, there have been delays, but we're encouraged by the downtick in COVID cases at this point and believe that we'll be able to implement our plan going forward as it relates to ensuring that that training can be offered and that we can return to the regular business of the Civilian Appeals Board. It's important that we note that that we take this very seriously, and it's important that we do justice. It's important that the complainants are able to be heard. It's important that the officers don't have these cases just hanging up. It's important that the CAP members are also able to have these cases heard and they're able to hear those cases. Like the court system, with judicial systems, we face challenges. As you may know, the courts currently can't hear jury trials or are not hearing jury trials for similar reasons. It's just that the rules and procedures that were created to govern CAB or to govern court systems were not designed with a prolonged pandemic in mind. But we're hopeful and helpful and excited about the fact that we will be able to return to business as usual soon, given the downtick in COVID cases. And I thank you for that. And with that, we'll open it up for questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davis. I have a couple questions. I will defer to my colleagues first, and then I'll open up to my questions. So Commissioner Jones, you want to start?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Chief and Deputy Chief and Mr. Davis. Appreciate your presence here on this afternoon. Chief, let me begin by really lifting up a piece of information that you made mention of that I think is worthy of mention again, and that is the no cases or no reports of use of force in 2020. And I think it speaks volumes about really I think you said it correctly. You said that the department is working diligently to operate with greater discretion and restraint. And I think, again, that needs to be lifted up, that the department is, again, recognizing the tension that exists within our country and our community, between police and community. And I just want to, again, recognize and applaud the effort of the officers of the department. And that's a big deal. I know that, again, that we're in the midst of a lot of back and forth between police and community. And I just think that it's important that we recognize that as something that is really good. And so thank you for that update, Chief. Also want to really put my support behind it's slide number 23. So I'm sorry, slide number 23. And that is this partnership with Mobile GR. I serve on the Mobile GR Commission and I've been getting regular updates, and I'm just really happy about that opportunity to pass that particular responsibility on to Mobile GR. Grateful that Mr. Nairmore is recognizing it as an opportunity. I do think it's innovative because it, in many ways, makes sense that it land there, and perhaps frees up officers who are normally engaged in that activity. And to that end, I'm wondering, Chief, if you could address or just really answer the question of what does that mean for the department? I mean, if that is one less thing off of the plate of your officers, what does that mean in terms of the ability for the officers to engage in the work?
Yes, Commissioner, and thanks for recognizing that force that I mentioned. What I did say, though, was there was no use of firearm force. There were force used within the department, but officers were engaged in all these activities of taking over 100 guns off the street. They were making the good decisions, not to disparage other communities, but we've seen unfortunate incidents where mistakes have been made. And I've no illusion anything could happen at any time, but in 2020, our officers used the correct amount of force when engaged with firearms, and there were no incidents where officers used firearms. But to your part mention, there were over 3,000, I believe, incidents where officers were sent on parking complaints alone. What that will do is allow us, again, we're at 297, we're doing all these things within those constraints. As part of the Hillard-Hines study, one of the things they recommended was looking at parking enforcement, because they said you have enough officers, but you need to do less. You're doing too much, to put it in general terms. So this will free up officers to do more community engagement, hopefully get officers out on foot patrols as time will allow. It's those type things that will free officers up.
Very good. Thank you, Chief.
As we look at other things.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My last question, if I could, Mayor, is it's a comment to Mr. Davis, and that is, Mr. Davis, thank you for the update regarding the RFP and the evidence-based violence reduction effort. And I just want to wholeheartedly put my support behind, I think you provided two options, but option 2, and that is the idea of the city really serving in the capacity as contractor with Cure Violence or another evidence-based intervention model. And I'll go so far as to say that I'm, again, in full support of, I can respect and admire the work of the others that have been mentioned, but I think a lot is, I've gotten significant feedback from community about their desire to have Cure Violence implemented, and I am in total agreement with that. And I think that this particular model, I know for a fact that there are at least 4 cities recently who have followed the same suit, have followed the same process, and that's Charlotte, Jacksonville, St. Louis, and Minneapolis are 4 cities that have partnered directly with Cure Violence, and then those cities have turned around and partnered with community to carry out the work. And so I think it's a great idea, and it's an opportunity again to really respond to the often mentioned desire of the community to have Cure Violence implemented, and the opportunity. And I think part of the dynamic here that perhaps isn't always considered with initiatives like this is that's a pretty significant burden quite often for some nonprofit organizations to serve in that capacity as the lead organization. And I think with the city serving in the capacity as being lead organization, that alleviates a lot of the pressure that some nonprofits may have in terms of making sure that they have the right capacity to be able to carry out the work. And so, again, I appreciate the effort. I know that it's been somewhat time consuming, and I think yet I believe it's been very thorough in the process, and as well as making sure that you're involving folks from outside of OPA and the department to come in and play a role in terms of decision making too. So thank you. Thanks all for the presentations.
Thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate your input on that. I know you've been actively engaged in that conversation. Let's go with Commissioner Repart.
Thanks, Mayor. I too want to thank the chief for this really thorough update with lots of progress, lots to celebrate. Just quickly, I'll chime in and affirm also I'm in favor of option 2 when it comes to the evidence-based model. And so I appreciate that whole committee's effort to evaluate the proposals, and that took a lot of time, and it's unfortunate that we didn't get one that felt like it hit the mark. But so I just want to voice my support for option number 2. I think I just have one question, but a few things that I just want to again affirm is I'm really excited that there's some additional possibilities to explore around the minor traffic accident response. And I remember hearing that presentation in public safety and feeling like that was going to be a really great way to, again, innovate, right? And shift things to focusing on the things that matter most. Also want to share my support for that behavioral health team and that additional CIT training for the department. I think that all along, I think that it's going to take time to get there, but having folks, behavioral health folks, respond to calls for service would be a huge win for the community and for the department. And also, again, the emphasis on restorative justice, and I'd like to add to that decriminalization. I still think that there are still some things that we can look at around there, but I do appreciate the restorative justice work that gets done with the law department, OPA, and department working together. It's quiet. It's hard to celebrate it because it is case by case, but it's really, really great work, and I'm so thankful for continued progress on those. The one question I had was, Chief, could you give us an update on the filling of the extra deputy chief position and how that process has gone and what the prospects look like for that?
Yes, sir. We just had interviews last week, and we are, I believe it's scheduled for this week coming up, and then there'll be backgrounds done on our final candidate. I hope to have that position filled within a month or so. Again, we had gone through the process. Some of our finalists backed out of the process, which delayed us, and we had to reopen it. But we hope to have that position filled within the next month and a half at the latest.
Hey, Chief, if I could, I just want to clarify that Commissioner Repart, I think you asked about the extra deputy chief. So the deputy chief's positions have been filled with Deputy Chief Rogers. I think Commissioner Repart and the chief was referring to the chief of staff.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, that was the position. Sorry, I got that turned around.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying, City Manager. All right, I'll open it up for other questions or comments. Commissioner Moody?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank the chief for this report. But I have 3 questions, and I want to just get right to the point. The first question I have was on page 9 of your diagram, where you talked about attracting hiring and the retained hirees. I just wanted to know what is the criteria for the high performance? That's number one in terms of what you're looking for and how you plan to attract hirees. Second, on 14, you talked about gangs. I needed to know, is there any number of gangs in our city, and what type of gangs are they? And if there's names that go with them, what are those names? And then 3, on 16, you talked about evaluating mental health. How are the officers able to evaluate a mental health crisis when there is a call that they have to go out on?
Yeah, sir, to your first question, hiring and retaining, we're in the process of reviewing along with HR and a few other, Patty Cottle. I think Mr. Matthews is going to be involved moving forward in our reviewing our hiring process and how we go about retaining those that we do hire. So we're taking a look at that right now, and that's all part of the plan to reevaluate how we go about the hiring process. Ms. Foster from HR, she's involved in it. Alex Pope. As far as gangs, I generally don't put names on gangs. When we talk about gangs in Grand Rapids, they're usually street block-based gangs. They're not what a lot of people envision as the big organized gangs, although we do see some of that. Again, that's one of the reasons why I felt we needed that gang intelligence unit to identify these groups that are going out, or gangs. Groups or gangs are interchangeable, in my opinion. They're the ones that are going out committing a lot of these violent acts so that we can identify and hold them accountable for what they're doing. The mental health crisis, part of the training is for officers to understand that, but our dispatchers will receive additional training in recognizing when someone is involved in a mental health crisis. And once we get that team up and rolling, and then the mobile response team working in conjunction with officers when it's safe, that team will go out. But that all involves getting everyone up to speed on what to recognize and being able to recognize it. That's where I mentioned the CIT, crisis intervention training, where our officers are being put through so that they can recognize it and provide the services that are needed.
Thank you, Chief. Let's see, who else? Commissioner Isasi, did I see your hand up? Go ahead.
Thank you. My question, I wanted to just add on to what Commissioner Repart said, asked about the openings. I know you talked about some of those circumstances being out of the department's control. Is that the same for the public information officer, that you've had some people and they backed out, Chief?
That is correct, Commissioner, and we're in the process of that. We're in that process now. Okay. We've had to repost it and go through the process again. Okay.
My other question is, are we still, that there were a lot of changes last year, but are we still, was the department still working with, and this is both fire and police, working with the agency that was provided, it was like a psychologist that provided sort of, I think it was an optional program for officers and those in the fire department. I can't remember. Are we still doing that?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, you were breaking up a little bit. A program designed for.
And Chief, I think both of you were breaking up. So when she's asking a question, you may need to put your mic on mute.
Thank you. I'm thinking back to a presentation when I was on public safety, and it was for both the fire department and the police department. A gentleman came in, I think it was his business, a psychologist, to help with the impacts of trauma, sort of after events. And I think it was a really kind of billed as part of the benefits to both of the departments. And I believe it was a voluntary program. I don't remember if it was a pilot, but I'm just wondering if we're still doing that.
Yes, ma'am. Now I know it's Robertson Health, and Joel Robertson was a presenter for that. And we have had that. That unfortunately we had to cut from the budget this year. Although I still have been in contact with him, they're still willing to do some work. We're going to try and figure out how we can make it happen. Maybe private funding, or he's even talked about some in kind, but I really believe that was a good program for officers' wellness. But we did hire our internal person that is on staff here now, and she's our wellness coordinator that works with the city wellness coordinator to help officers with resources that are available. So it's different, but we did try to fill that void that was created when we stopped that program with our internal person.
Okay. I think I have three more. My third question is, I know a few weeks ago we talked about, maybe right after our last commission meeting, about the piloting the survey to the community about their sentiments. I didn't see that in the, kind of the list of what's next. And so I think if that's not in there, we should include that. I know that we probably don't have enough information, but I'd like to see that as a full picture. Just another piece that I know, working across not just the department, but working with communications. My fourth question is around lifting up the voice of the community and community development and community engagement. This to me is, and I don't think there's a real question that, other than when we met in October, I'll bring it up again. We saw the presenter talk about the slides of sort of the different levels of community engagement. I think we, whatever department it is, not just the police department, really need to define that. So when people are engaging with this, there is a sense of what are we actually going to do with that information? What is our intention? Because we might not be at maybe the highest level of engagement. So that's just more of a comment, because what I don't want is for our department, for others to put forth this effort. We have community that's coming forward, but I think we're sometimes missing like what's going to happen after that engagement. And so that's not solely on you, Chief. That's, I think, across the city to define that more. But certainly the topics that we have around public safety are probably more heightened and felt. We have people who have continued to ask us, what does that reimagination look like? What does investment look like in our city overall? So I just wanted to point that out. And then my last comment is going to your presentation, Brandon. So in the last part, I know that you mentioned a couple of providers, and I know that there was just this month announced 21 cities that are working with a variety of private funders, as well as the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform, and Advanced Peace is one of them. And so really, I think doing what we want to do in these 21 cities, probably the closest one to us is South Bend. So as you're pulling in that information, it'd be great to know what they're doing as part of that consortium. So it's essentially, they're launched the National Offices of Violence Prevention in these 21 different cities. So I'd be very interested to see what Advanced Peace is doing in that regard, and how that might play out as we look at what proposals would come forth if we go with that option too. So thank you.
I think on this follow-up, if City Manager Matthews could help the chief with the engagement approach, because I think what we've done is elevated that to citywide coordination with some of the new tools that we talked about this morning.
Thank you, City Manager. Mr. Matthews, do you want to add anything to that related to the flash vote and community engagement?
Sorry, I was just having my own technical difficulties there. Yeah, we're taking a comprehensive look at all of that. I've had customer service innovation, communications, and equity and engagement all getting together to talk about the interoperability of everything that we're doing from a community engagement standpoint. One of the things that you may have noted from the presentation this morning is that our intent is this spring to release an RFP to bring on a contractor specifically that can do a wholesale analysis of what we're doing, identify the gaps and the needs, and help construct a plan that we can start to build and train to for the organization. We have a lot of pockets in the organization that are doing pretty good work when it comes to community engagement. Really, the issue is that there's not consistency across the organization. And to Commissioner Isasi's point, there's not consistency in terms of both delivery, but also in establishing what the expected outcomes are, what the expectations should be of both the organization and the people participating, and what are the methods for closing the loop and providing feedback on the back end of that engagement. And those are all things that we want somebody to be able to come in and help take a look at. And it's been an identified gap for us since I got here that, you know, it's a challenge when we don't have someone carrying the mantle necessarily for engagement. And it's something that we want to address over the longer term is within Stacy's shop to have a center of excellence and a community of practice that can coordinate the training up of the rest of the organization on doing these things successfully.
Mayor, if I may also, I recognize that it's not everyone in the community, but part of our plan also calls for quarterly meetings with different groups. And one of those meetings we just had in January was with Link Up, NAAC, and a few other organizations to provide them with updates. And we committed that as things come up, if it's not quarterly, we certainly could have meetings. There are groups out there, I'll be quite candid, that it's been difficult engaging them on a meaningful way. They provided some feedback, but it's feedback that is, I don't know how productive it is, but we have been willing to meet and engage with any groups that have been out there over the last year, and we'll continue to do that. And I think, Mr. Matthews, if we can get a more coordinated effort to close that loop, we're going to be a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for adding that. And I know I heard positive feedback about that, and I'm glad you're continuing to be proactive and meet regularly with our partners in the community. So thank you. All right, I think I'll move to Commissioner O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the Chief and Deputy Chief Rogers. I really appreciate the update on the strategic plan. You know, I'm really impressed by the fact that you know, we challenged the police department to do better, to be better, as I think we have since I've been at this table, and it's been you know, sitting as a commissioner for 5 years now, and having watched the arc of our public safety, and since the you know, Mr. Washington joined us here in Grand Rapids, you know, it's been a constant call to reimagine how we do our business in a variety of ways in Grand Rapids, and I think this the continuation of the strategic plan is quite remarkable to see. I think we've you know, we've asked a lot of our public safety and police department in the way in which they conduct their business, and you know, challenge them to be better in a lot of ways. And we've had the public call for our police department to be better. And I think this strategic plan is evidence that they're responding to the needs of the community, the rational needs of the community. This isn't, this isn't burn it down because it's not working. It's be better, have a plan, work the plan, evaluate the outcomes of what we've done, and sometimes that's uncomfortable. But then we have to reimagine how we continue to keep doing it. And I'm thrilled about this. I think there's a ton of people that are of a belief that we can have the best police department in the country. I think we're already seeing these outcomes, but it's a big organization with a lot of moving parts. And, none of these things happen quickly, but the fact that they've responded to two concerns and two needs, and have, tried to reimagine and put people in operations in different places is quite impressive. And so, we will never arrive, but we're making great strides in doing things much differently than we've done in the past. And the men and women who do the job on a daily basis have to react to that, and have to do that in the midst of a national, state, local pandemic, and with rising tensions and crises all around. This is not like normal times to have to reimagine things either. And so I'm just I think it's important to say that I continue to support the men and women of the Grand Rapids Police Department, and challenge them to do better, and it's also my responsibility to hold them accountable when they don't do well. And so I think that's all our responsibilities as commissioners. And so thank you again for the work you've put into this, and I look forward to continuing to support the good work that you do, and making sure that if things aren't working the way they should be, that we'll continue to hold you accountable to do better.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, are there any other questions or comments? All right, I'll end with just a couple. So one, I will add my support, Mr. Davis, for you and the committee working to move forward. I really think it's important that we have an evidence-based violence prevention program in our community. I'm supportive of option 2 as well, and we'll look forward to hearing how those additional conversations progress. And then I too want to just add my thanks to the chief and Deputy Chief Rogers for all of their work within the department, as well as all of the partners who are joining with us. As Commissioner O'Connor said, we work to really do better and be better and make the hard changes that we know we need to make. I'm delighted to see the integration of some of the key recommendations from the Hillard-Hines study. I know those are in the strategic plan, but it's really affirming to see those move forward, or at least start to move forward. So thank you, Chief. And then again, I go back to the strategic plan that we talked about last year. There's a lot of important objectives laid out in there, and to see you move forward with implementation is wonderful, especially in light of the pandemic that we've all been living through this past year. I'm glad to see us looking at the examination of a mobile health and crisis response team. That's been something I feel like we've talked about for years. And to see that move forward, I think will be important for our community as we try to better respond to those calls when individuals are in crisis. And then I think all of us are eager to see how we implement the neighborhood-based policing model. So please, I know that you provide updates to the Public Safety Committee. Many of us call in and listen to those meetings, but if you can just continue to keep us abreast of progress made there and what that means for all of our neighborhoods, that would be really helpful. So with that, City Manager, any final questions or comments before we move on to the next topic?
So again, my appreciation to the chief and oversight office for their work. They make it look easier than it is. It's a lot of work, and I think it goes very unnoticed at times and often unappreciated. I want to thank them for the work that they do.
Thank you, City Manager. All right, City Manager, next we'll go to our topic on the master plan process. So I believe we have Ms. Turkelson who's going to join us for this and walk us through a presentation. And then I think for each one, I'll just pause at the end for Q&A and additional comments. So Ms. Turkelson, you want to take it away?
Thank you. Is my audio still working okay? Perfect. Okay. So good afternoon, Commission. Thank you for this opportunity to provide you with an update on the progress we have made on the city's citywide master plan update. This is indeed an update. Our 2002 plan really helped to establish a solid foundation, but we do recognize that there's a need and a desire to begin addressing issues that are not currently considered by our past land use policies. And this would include issues such as environmental justice and safe communities. We need to look at our housing policies and address a serious housing crisis. We need to do all of this through an equity lens, and we know that this is going to take focused and intentional engagement strategies. In late 2020, we provided City Commission with an update on the progress that we had made at that point. Recall that we are in phase 1, or the pre-scoping phase, which included the hiring of 20 neighborhood facilitators that led the review of the current master plan, and perhaps equally important, began community discussions about what's working and what needs our attention. During that December update, we committed to returning to the Commission to provide you with a complete report out of the pre-scoping phase. And this information will be used to focus us on what's important to the community and help us obtain the right support to complete the update of the plan. So I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Leila Zani. Leila has been leading this effort and is capably serving as the project manager for the master plan update. She will provide you with a thorough review and analysis of the pre-scoping phase.
Thank you, Kristen. So hello, Mayor and Commissioners, good afternoon. As Kristen said, we have completed the Master Plan Facilitator Program, so I'm here to share the results. Today, we'll go over the goals, structure, participants, findings of the program, and then discuss next steps. So one of the questions we got a lot throughout this facilitator program was, what's happened since the 2002 master plan? What progress have you made? So we created this graphic to show a few, but obviously not all of the great work that's been accomplished since the last master plan. And we categorized it under each theme of the master plan. Some highlights include a new zoning ordinance that was adopted to replace the 1969 one, and the new zoning ordinance was based on smart growth principles, adopting 11 area-specific plans and corridor plans, working on the Grand River restoration, working towards that, installing green infrastructure that filters over 3 million gallons of stormwater per year, installing 114 miles of bicycle infrastructure, expanding our partnerships, expanding the Riverwalk, and rezoning industrial areas along the river to allow for more mixed-use development. And additionally, we've seen over $4.1 billion invested in commercial construction since the 2002 plan's completion. Next slide, please. The strategic plan's governmental excellences, Objective 6, calls for us to update the master plan to enable smart, equitable growth and conduct a complete scoping of that update. To do this, we first realized we needed to review the 2002 master plan with the community to figure out what's working, what's not working, and what needs to change. We also knew we wanted diverse participation, and the strategic plan calls for us to measure the percentage of participants that are residents of color. The strategic plan's Engaged and Connected Community Objective 4 also calls for us to elevate resident voice in city operations by leveraging partnerships and neighborhood leadership to gather and lift up voice. Next slide, please. So what did that look like? We leveraged existing partnerships and also sought out new ones to hire 20 facilitators distributed across our 3 wards. They first took some trainings. They completed the City of Grand Rapids Equity Foundations training, MSU Extension Citizen Planner training, which is Planning 101, if you will, and also MSU Extension's facilitation training. We gave the facilitators a lot of flexibility in how they reviewed the plan with the community, but we advised them to divide it into 4 rounds with 3 chapters reviewed each round. And then we also provided questions for each round. Now, some facilitators opted to host 1 large meeting each round, and others decided to have smaller meetings or more one-on-one conversations. And of course, COVID threw a big wrench in the middle of all of this. So as you'll see in the pictures on this slide, some of the meetings were held outside or virtually or inside, but distanced and with masks. And the facilitators did a great job adapting to all of the changes and requirements. Next slide. So here's a list of our facilitators. You'll notice most of them represent neighborhood associations, a lot of familiar names on there. We also had other organizations such as the Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired, Treetops Collective, a resident who lives in Campow Commons that engaged his neighbors, and a resident in our that engaged as part of our Age-Friendly Communities initiative. We also had Helping Important People Succeed, also known as HIPS, and I have Mary Harden Johnson to speak in the next couple slides about the work that she did. Next slide. So in total, our facilitators hosted 92 community meetings that engaged over 530 residents in English and other languages, such as Spanish and the ones listed on your screen. We also tracked the engagement for each round. So you'll see on this image that the 3rd ward was consistently highly engaged throughout all 4 rounds. And that gets at our desire to engage diverse voices. Next slide. Per the strategic plan, we asked participants to anonymously share their race and ethnicity information with us if they were comfortable. This chart compares our participation demographics, which are in yellow, with that as the city of a whole, which are in blue. And as you can see, we engaged a larger percentage of BIPOC individuals than that as the city of a whole. Next slide. So before we move further, I want to ask Mary Harden Johnson, the Executive Director of HIPS, to share more about her program. She is just one example of all of the great work that our facilitators did. So we thought we'd turn that over and let her speak for a minute.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon, Grand Rapids. I am Mary Harden Johnson of HIPS, Helping Important People Succeed. We are a faith-based program, and I just want to say thank you for allowing our ambassadors to be a part of this wonderful event. And what I want to add in regards to our ambassador program, we met for 12 weeks. We met on a bi-weekly basis, And we saw our young people between the ages of 10 to 17. And when the developmentation of the strategic plan, the master plan was made in 2002, a lot of my kids were not even born at that time. And then those that were only toddlers. So this was a great opportunity to get a perspective from their lenses. And they were up for the challenge and they did an absolutely wonderful job. How did we engage our youth? Well, we had to recreate the plan to make it youth friendly. We did programs with our kids and activities, for example, the scavenger hunt. We had them to go into their communities, which was the 3rd ward, in specific areas for them to observe. What do you see? What do you don't see? We used the Google map. We used the Google Classroom. We did Google Meet. And my kids just had a wonderful, wonderful time. Our kids had a wonderful time. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience for our kids. We're looking forward for more activities in our community. Mayor Bliss, I want to say thank you to you. You really engaged with our kids with your YouTube video and encouraged them. So I appreciate the endless support. And also with Layla, you did a wonderful job continuously with our youth. So we are looking forward to Plan B to see what's going to happen. It is our hope and desire that the information that our youth gave, that it will be used to uplift their communities and for them to, their stakeholders, and for them to be empowered to continue to be the leaders that they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That was great. Next slide. Additionally, we had the facilitator program. We also did an internal review with planning staff. So we took 13 weeks and we had 11 planners complete the review. So they reread the master plan and then answered 95 land use questions that were designed to draw out their experiences, their professional experiences with the master plan. Next slide. So through both the facilitator program and the internal review, certain topics rose to the top. I'll go over them more in the coming slides, but the biggest ones were equity, safety, and housing, as Kristen mentioned earlier. And we found these results validating because they align with themes found in the strategic plan and what we've been hearing from residents through other city initiatives. Next slide. This slide compares the 2002 themes with what we're hearing now. Overall, our review found that the 2002 master plan, which is based on smart growth, which is still a best practice in the urban planning field today, held up well, but the conversations under each theme have evolved and warrant an update. So the image on the left shows the themes then and kind of what we're talking about now. And the next slides go through each theme and goes more in depth with the then and now. So next slide, please. So the first theme on the 2002 master plan was great neighborhoods. Back then, we were talking about housing diversity, quality of life, and quality of education. And today we're hearing that residents want the next master plan to have more of a neighborhood focus, a discussion of incremental and infill development, and development without displacement. Gentrification is a big concern, as I'm sure you all know. Homelessness and housing were also discussed, as well as youth development, education. The 2002 plan only briefly mentioned education. Next slide. The next theme is vital business districts. So back then we were talking about a healthy downtown and redeveloping our riverfront and also revitalizing our traditional business areas. And also there's a concept of creating walkable centers at 3 different levels: mixed use, neighborhood, village, and sub-regional centers. And what we're hearing now is that the residents, and that center idea didn't quite take off as planned and described in the plan. So residents, we heard from them, they said we can drop that concept for the next master plan. They also want to see more business types and uses in our TBA districts, and then more diversity of businesses throughout our business districts, and diversity with ownership and type of products offered. Next slide, thank you. The next theme is a strong economy and focus on balancing economic growth with priorities for neighborhoods, the environment, and quality of development. Now residents are talking about creating an environment that everyone can benefit from, so that equity perspective, and also looking at remaining industrial areas next to residential areas and through an environmental justice lens, and continuing to improve transit for job access. Next slide. Back then, we were also talking about creating alternatives for driving your vehicle. So better pedestrian options, bicycle lanes, things like that. And also balancing parking with a quality pedestrian experience. Today, the focus is on accessibility for everybody, and then more pedestrian and bicycling enhancements. There seems to be a hunger for that. And we got a lot of differing opinions on parking, which I guess I'm not surprised. Some neighborhoods, wanted to get rid of all parking requirements, while others were like, we need more parking. So that's always a fun topic. Next slide. The next theme is a city that enriches our lives. So back then we were talking about building on the Grand River, redeveloping the rapids and the riverfront, creating more parks and open space and art. The 2002 plan only briefly mentioned art, and today residents want a more of a focus on art, culture, and vibrancy, more of a human element, more parks, safe parks, and open space, and then designing for an aging population. Next slide. The next theme is a city in balance with nature, which focused on revitalizing Grand Rapids core to limit urban sprawl, improving air quality and clean water, and climate change and global warming were not mentioned. And so now residents want us to take more of a forward stance on those issues. They describe talking about air quality and clean water as like a very 2002 way to talk about climate change, and they want to see us be more aggressive with that conversation. So they were talking about acknowledging climate change, and then talking about climate change adaptation and mitigation, environmental justice, and creating local food systems. The last theme is partnerships, and residents still feel that partnerships are important today to accomplish all of the work that ends up in these plans. And residents want to see more outreach to all residents, especially those that aren't necessarily represented by a neighborhood association. Next slide. We also got just some feedback in general to inform the process. So participants want the next master plan update to be data-driven and have robust engagement. We also know we need to evaluate and revise the future land use map. And they also wanted to see some sort of implementation after the plan creation reporting. So that could be like a dashboard or an annual update. And admittedly, we didn't do the greatest job with that after the 2002 plan. So they wanted to see more of that. Next slide. So the next steps are to form the steering committee. We've been meeting internally to brainstorm a list of participants, and that steering committee would ultimately be appointed by the mayor. We're also going to use all of the great information that we got through this facilitator program and our internal review to write and release the RFP, the request for proposals, to hire a consultant team. We will then interview and hire the team, and we expect the steering committee to play a large role in the interview process, with City Commission ultimately approving the contract. We then plan to begin the public process later this year, and we thought the facilitator program was such a success that we would like to continue it in some form or expand it for the next phase to increase participation and gather feedback. Next slide. And so here's what that looks like in timeline form. I should note that this is a very high level and tentative timeline, but here it is for you to look at. And with that, I will take any questions.
Well, thank you, Layla and Mary, and to all of our facilitators. I'm actually really proud of this pre-scoping phase. I think we all found it very rewarding. It was validating, but more importantly, it was extremely informative for us. I think it will position the city really well as we move forward in this process. So with that concludes our presentation, and Layla and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both for your presentation. Mary, thank you for joining us and for all of your work. I agree that it's been a really robust pre-work, I should say. I think it goes well beyond just the conversations, but has really given us a lot of insight and direction as we move forward. And I know I look forward to working with the staff and the team as we move forward. This I see as one of the most important processes that we will be participating in as a community over the next 12 to 18 months. So thank you both for your work. All right, I'll open it up for questions and comments from commissioners. Commissioner Jones?
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to Ms. Turkelson and company, Ms. Layla and Ms. Johnson for your presence here on this afternoon. I want to again commend you on the update, and I think it speaks to the power of Indigenous wisdom. And along those lines, as I'm looking at this very impressive list on slide 44, I can't help but to wonder, and maybe I should know this, but did we perhaps compensate these individuals to participate in this role?
Yes, we did.
That's okay. Very good. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're doing just that. I think that it speaks volumes when we are cognizant of just the value of Indigenous wisdom, and that historically it's not been something that has been quote unquote paid for, but has been given away. And there's nothing that can really compare to it. And again, not only are we getting, as an example, those facilitators not only brought their skill, but they brought their social capital as well. And again, that's invaluable. So happy to hear that. And I'm really, really happy about the days ahead in terms of how we move forward with the master plan. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize city staff and the city manager, I think, for approaching the master plan with the strategic lens and not trying to rush through it. I know that there was a lot of pressure, I think, in community to try to get it started as soon as possible. And I will admit that I was feeling that way as well, that we should just, move rather aggressively toward it. But I think that perhaps it was best for us to, I guess, time it in such a way to where it can be a very thoughtful process, and hopefully an opportunity for everyone who desires to have input will have that opportunity as we continue to develop the timeline. So thank you again.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I know many of us were actively engaged in Grand Rapids. I know I served on that committee, and as well, we were all well aware of the really incredible process back in 2002. My perspective is that you both have taken what we did well through those two processes, and you've really built upon them. So I'm excited to see not just all the work that has been done so far, but really the work going forward. So, Commissioners, other questions and comments? Commissioner Isasi?
Thank you. My question is around, so thanks for kind of, putting it in the process of what has been done right now and who's being involved. So this pre-work, the pre-scoping, that's great language for us to continue to share that with our residents. My question is, you've done that in the community. What does that look like internally in terms of that lift of, sort of making sure that it's not, right, it's not just the planning department, but across the entire organization of the city. Obviously variety of goals. We just went through the strategic plan. We have our overall strategic plan, not just for the police department. So I'm interested in learning more about that, or if that will be part of the next phase. And then, I appreciated the next steps. I'll be interested, since I wasn't involved at that time, to know how we will appoint individuals, how many will serve, to make sure that we can have those representative voices at the table. I've had a lot of people who have asked about kind of where that process is. I think from the moment that this was announced, we had a lot of people who were excited and interested. And then my last question is, will we get maybe in that next phase, in terms of obviously knowing there's an asterisk on everything because of COVID, but as we move forward in the process in terms of different metrics in terms of who we're reaching, you shared some of that in terms of the wards. I really also appreciated the piece about like in the age-friendly community or youth, and making sure we have multi-dimensions that we're sharing about who we're engaging with. So I'd be interested to know what those metrics might look like in the future as we continue this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I understand that good planning takes some patience, and it takes time. So I do appreciate you walking alongside us with this process. We're certainly trying to approach it with a level of intentionality that I believe is needed for us to have the product that we want, that we desire to accomplish what needs to be done for our community. In terms of how this will be used across the organization, you know, this master plan, I think, is going to be a vehicle for a lot of conversations to happen. And so while one of my goals is certainly to provide us with revised and updated land use policies that address our needs, I think it would be silly of me to sit here and suggest that there won't be other conversations that will that need to happen and that should happen, and that the master planning process will be a forum for that. My colleagues will be coming to all of these meetings and will be participating as well. So I know that Mr. Marquardt, for example, is updating his Parks and Rec master plan. We've had some conversations about making sure that we strategize in our engagement processes so we don't fatigue our community. Allison also has quite a bit of work with her, sorry, Allison, I can't remember the name of your climate project, your C4 project, I believe, that we can also have those conversations at the same time. We know that they're going to happen, and so we'll have the appropriate staff at the meetings to hear that feedback and utilize it for their work that they're doing. In terms of metrics, Layla and I do have some idea about the metrics we hope and that we will include or capture, and yes, absolutely, that will be part of our report out. I think that developing an exhaustive list of the metrics will be a really good assignment for the steering committee. And so that will be one of their tasks, is to help us develop what metrics should be captured as part, in addition to the ones that are laid out in the strategic plan, of course. I think I got all of your questions. I apologize if I missed anything there.
Ms. Ferguson, so let me add to your response in terms of, can you hear me better now? let me add to your response. Just like we're the intent when you go through a comprehensive master planning process that you only do, you know, every 15, 20 years or so, just as intentional as we're being about gathering the perspectives and expertise from community, we are likewise that intentional about getting the subject matter experts within the organization who will have sections of the plan that will be directly related to their ongoing day-to-day operations. We will certainly have them involved. And I expect that unlike similar to many other cities who go through this planning process, the consultant also will be very helpful in making sure that we have cross-sectional expertise when we're talking about different sections of the plan. So I intend to make sure that, you know, this is a full team effort, and that we'll, you know, we'll need staff to do things external. We'll need staff to help with the community engagement part. We'll need staff, as they mentioned, around the areas of infrastructure expertise that affects land use. But also, I think we'll need to think about this plan in a different way, not only interact with the environment or land, but how we interact with people. So that, to me, that will be different in 2021, 2022, unlike previous master plans, that the human impact is going to be just as important to consider, and the social impact will be just as important to consider as the land use impact.
And I thank you, City Manager. And I anticipate that as the team comes together and the consultant is identified, they'll come up with many creative ways to make sure people are engaged, similar to some of the examples from years past with the games and community conversations. And there was a lot of input in many different formats last time, which I think gave people multiple ways to engage. So I anticipate there will be ideas brought forward that we can't even imagine at this moment. So. All right, other questions and comments from Commissioner Ruppert?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Kristen and Layla, for that presentation. I guess I have just two questions. One is, what will the role of the facilitators be going forward? Was that just for the pre-work, or will they be engaged throughout the process? And then the second is, if you could share with us a snapshot of who in terms of like slots that you're trying to fill for that steering committee. And, you know, if we have some ideas about who would be a good good service on that committee, the best way for us to share that with your department.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the role of the facilitators going forward, there's no formalized role at this point. There was 20 contracts that were issued for $5,000 each to operate that the neighborhood facilitator community conversation discussions that just happened. Some of them, I hope, will choose to participate as we move forward in the engagement. We would certainly look to them to continue the good work that they've done. Layla and I do anticipate the use of the mini grant concept again. Speaking to Commissioner Jones's earlier comment about making sure that we're paying for the expertise and the knowledge. So I do anticipate circling back with them, but there's no formal role at this point. In terms of the snapshot, Layla, you can please help me out, but we're really looking for individuals that could represent their respective communities. So probably the healthcare industry, the business community, certainly having resident voice. Lily, sectors, please.
Business, transportation, and we're trying to keep ideally we want the steering committee to be around like 30 people. So I know there's a lot of interest. And we also are trying to get a really diverse group.
Yeah, we're making every effort to make sure that the steering committee, at least the recommendations from staff, are as diverse as possible. So if you do have any suggestions, please feel free to email them to me.
And we should also note that we want them to also have availability to take part because this is going to be kind of a long haul and a time commitment.
Yeah, thank you. And I think back to some of the work we've done in the past, particularly around the steering committee we put together for the Equitable Economic Development Plan. The department did a really great job of making sure that it was diverse and it had representation from a whole host of different interests and sectors in the community. And so we'll look forward to seeing the draft. And if we have some recommendations, obviously send them to Ms. Turkelson. All right, commissioners, any final questions or comments? Oh, did I freeze up? Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay. Any final questions or comments before we move on and shift to a discussion on housing and homelessness? All right, I will again, Kristen and Layla, thank you for your work, and we'll look forward to additional updates as we move forward. I will now shift to City Manager. Is there anything you wanted to say before we move to this topic? I see Mr. Kilpatrick has joined us. I'm assuming Ms. Bohatch is also presenting with this section, or am I missing anyone?
I'm sorry, Mayor. I thought you were asking about the master plan process. Oh, about the next presentation. No, we're ready. We're locked and loaded, ready to go. We want to get together.
Yeah. Okay, who's taking the lead on the presentation? I see Mr. Kilpatrick is. Should I turn it to him?
Yep.
Okay.
So, and Mr. DeLong too. I think you have words. Let's go ahead and pull the presentation.
All right. Ryan Kilpatrick, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for all of your exceptional work with us this past year. And I will turn it over to you.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Eric DeLong, if you want to interrupt me on the front end, feel free. Otherwise, I can dive right in. So we've been working for the last several months on identifying and articulating a method and a pathway for the city's affordable housing fund. What we want to be able to do is have a mechanism that is both trusted and transparent, so that as the city continues to invest funds, we have a process for those funds to continue to grow, to create what is similar to an endowment, but also a process for those funds to be spent within the community. So we have had very productive conversations with the Grand Rapids Community Foundation about creating what is being referred to as a non-endowed designated fund. And so that fund will produce, it will be invested and produce returns on investment, but it will also be relatively liquid, so that the fund board will have the discretionary ability to make recommendations to spend on priority projects. Currently, what we have available is roughly $875,000. That would be the beginning fund balance.
Housing Next in our report this past summer has recommended a target goal of roughly $20 million. That would not be all city public funds. That would be a combination of public funds and solicitations of private investments, whether from local corporate partners, philanthropic donations, foundations, what have you. So the existing potential funding sources from the public would be the 2% pilot fee. I think you all are familiar that an option was created a little over a year ago for low-income housing tax credit developers willing to pay the less than 4% payment in lieu of tax fee. 2% of that 3% pilot fee would be invested into the housing fund. In addition, potentially available proceeds from public property sales after other expenses are paid for would be a source of revenue for the housing fund. Potentially first-year income tax from new development, as well as I mentioned, private donors, foundations, corporations, institutions, and trusts. Next slide, please. So in terms of uses of the fund, this will be further refined by the Housing Fund Board. But to begin, we want to be able to provide some direction. So first and foremost is an opportunity to provide more direct assistance to qualified low-income residents. As Ms. Bohach will talk about later in the presentation, the additional funding as a result of COVID has really been highly successful in terms of the way those dollars have been utilized. And there may be a period of time where we need additional local funding to supplement those dollars, and the Affordable Housing Fund could be a potential source for that. But in addition, we want to make sure that we're thinking about both production of new housing and preservation of existing affordable housing. So this fund will be critical in pursuing preservation of existing both restricted and unrestricted affordable housing. Bridge loans for nonprofits. This essentially means we've got a lot of nonprofits who are doing extraordinary work, and they're limited in capacity primarily by the amount of funding that's available. So when we think about acquisition for property and pre-development, this will be a good source of capital for those nonprofit partners. It will also be an important source of capital to help assist with equitable homeownership goals and the Whole Homes Initiative. This is a program we're working on in partnership with Allison Sutter's team to really think about how do we reduce our carbon footprint from single-family homes and increase energy efficiency while reducing the utility bill of our low-income households. Making access to capital available to new developers, specifically developers of color. As the city grows, there will be opportunities for wealth creation. We want to make sure that we have capital available to support new developers of color who traditionally don't have access to the same kind of capital that others may. And so creating that funding source. And then, as has been done in the past, creating last dollar grant funding for low-income housing tax credit development and equity investment in affordable and missing middle building typologies. Next slide, please. So critical elements, we really want to make sure that this fund works collaboratively and in coordination with other sources of public funding. Obviously, there are CDBG and home dollars that are being invested, along with dollars that are being invested by public and private institutions across Kent County. This fund should be nimble and should be capable of working in coordination with those other sources of funding so that we're not running into each other in the process of trying to fund more housing and more affordability. So that's going to include partnering with not only city staff, but also the Housing Commission, the Land Bank Authority at the state level, our corridor improvement districts, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, and local CDFIs. Those are our nonprofit banking institutions that are already making significant investments in housing. We want to make sure that the board is providing oversight to the fund and that those board members have experience both in housing finance as well as lived experience from the community. So we don't want to have just professional finance experts, but also folks who have expertise in neighborhood development and in living in these neighborhoods. And finally, we want to make sure that we're tracking and reporting in a transparent way all of the ways that the fund is operating within the community and that we're disaggregating that data. Next slide, please. So as you all recall, in July, we released our report with the projected housing needs for the next 5 years. In summary, the amount of rental units that we need is roughly 5,300 units over 5 years, or a little over 1,050 units a year for the next 5 years. And in terms of our for sale need, we had about 3,500 additional housing units that are needed and that breaks down to about 710 new units per year. So that's what we're going to start benchmarking ourselves against in terms of how much housing we can produce. And then you'll see we've got the breakdown of the number of units needed by income category. Next slide, please. So this graph gives you a brief illustration of the amount of housing that has been produced over the last 6 years. You get a sense that the city has been doing very well in terms of increasing its overall housing production year over year. 2020 was obviously an anomalous year. A lot of factors have impacted the amount of housing that was produced in 2020. However, I do want to point out, in orange, what you're seeing is total housing units produced, including both affordable and market rate. In blue, what you're seeing is just the share of new units produced that were affordable. 2020 was our best year in the last 6 years in terms of affordable housing production. So there was some silver lining to this past year in terms of new production. And then what you're seeing in kind of semi-transparent is our projections going forward. This is based on both state and national trends and projections from the Home Builders Association, the Urban Land Institute. We anticipate that 2021 is going to continue to feel a little bit sluggish. We've got some headwinds in lumber supply, some headwinds in material costs. We believe we can outpace 2020, but we'll really be able to start ramping up in 2022 and 2023, exceeding our 2019 maximum goals by 2023. Next slide, please. So quick update. This is really giving praise to Kristen Turkelson and her team in the planning department. They have just recently, as you're aware, been able to execute on the zoning amendments to allow for ground floor residential and 4-story buildings in our TBA and commercial zone districts. For some parcels, this is doubling the availability of residential units on existing parcels. It's allowing us to take advantage of ground floor space that is already built out, but is vacant either due to COVID or simply because there's a lot of competition in an oversupplied market for retail space. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to catalyze some new investment in some existing retail spaces to get more residential units produced in the short term. Next slide. The other bit of good news in the last 2 months, we've had federal approval of a new floor for the 4% housing tax credit. I know you all are very familiar with the 9% program. Grand Rapids has been highly competitive in 9% tax credit awards. The 4% low-income housing tax credit has not been very well utilized in the state of Michigan, primarily because the amount of gap financing necessary for the 4% program was significant. The recent boost of the floor to the 4% program, what that means is previously that program, the actual value of those credits fluctuated with the federal interest rate. The new floor essentially sets the 4% credit at a true 4%. And what that did is it added roughly 20% of the value to the equity contribution from the federal government to those deals. So we anticipate seeing many more new 4% housing products in the upcoming year or two. There are still some economies of scale that need to be satisfied in order to make those projects viable. Typically, those are going to be 100-unit developments or more. But we do think we've got some opportunity sites in the city as well as across Kent County to leverage that 4% tax credit. Obviously, as well, there was a significant amount of CARES Act funding that has been devoted to housing, and that has been really well deployed by city staff, which Connie will talk about in just a minute. But the other critical elements coming forward in terms of satisfying our housing goals as we continue to press on, the new administration has been talking for over a year about a fully funded housing choice voucher program. This is a program that's available to households who earn 30% AMI or below. It's administered by the Grand Rapids Housing Commission for the city and by the Kent County Housing Commission at the county level. That's a critical program, and roughly 1 out of 3 households who are eligible actually receive a housing choice voucher. If that program is fully funded, it makes our work of producing an adequate amount of housing supply at the right price points much, much easier for those low-income households. So that would be a critical element. Obviously, affordability is dramatically driven by wages. For households who are earning less than the $15 wage, it gets very difficult to afford even older, less valuable housing stock, whether it's for sale or for rent. A $15 minimum wage hike would have positive impacts on our ability to produce more housing at the right price points. And finally, the repeal of the Faircloth Amendment is something that has been kicked around. I don't know how likely this is to be, but there have been several legislators who are talking about it. The Faircloth Amendment was adopted in 1999 and prohibited local units of government, as well as housing commissions, from making new investments in public housing after 1999. That's been an important provision that has really squelched our ability to build more housing at those lowest price points. And repealing that amendment would make it easier for us to build low-income housing, single-room occupancy housing for those households that are really at the lowest end of the income spectrum. Next slide. And I'm going to hand it off to Connie at this point.
Thank you, Ryan. It's clear from Ryan's presentation that there is plenty of work to do around housing. Balancing supply and demand is important, and critically important is creating and preserving housing affordability. The city's strategic plan focuses on this under the housing objective of the economic prosperity and affordability priority area. Some highlights of outcomes during the first 6 months of the fiscal year include approval of payment in lieu of taxes for 2 projects that will create 240 affordable housing units, completion of 26 rental and 2 homeowner affordable units with home investment partnership funds. More than 2,700 people received fair housing education services and 25 tests were conducted in the community. 115 low and moderate income residents received housing related legal services. 8 properties were brought into compliance with the city's property maintenance code through the Keeping People in Their Homes pilot project. There were construction starts for 479 housing units with another 16 in the development review process. And our legislative team testified in support of state legislation to allow the city to operate a land bank and advocated for reform in the Brownfield Redevelopment Financing Act. As we continue to work throughout the remainder of the fiscal year, we will monitor the status of the state's low-income housing tax credit awards. As Ryan indicated, in Grand Rapids, we've had a number of projects that were submitted this year. And if those were actually financed, it would create 709 housing units, of which 688 or 97% would be affordable units. We will continue to implement the newly adopted Regional Housing and Community Development Plan for investments that will begin in July at the start of our new fiscal year. And we'll work to wrap up the Keeping People in Their Homes project through the code compliance and community development departments. And we'll continue to work on housing development in the Market Avenue corridor, establish the Affordable Housing Fund, and advocate for land bank legislative changes. Next slide, please. This morning, City Manager Washington touched on issues of homelessness. Here's some trend data from point-in-time counts coordinated by the Coalition to End Homelessness. The total number of persons experiencing homelessness and chronic homelessness in Kent County in January of 2020 increased compared to that in 2019. You can also see the breakdown of persons in emergency shelter, transitional housing, and those who were unsheltered at the time. The most recent point-in-time count was conducted on January 27th of this year. There is not official data available as of yet, and we hope to have those numbers soon. Next slide, please. The city's strategic plan focuses on safe, stable, and permanent housing under the Safe Community Priority Area. During the first 6 months of the fiscal year, the HOT team continued to provide needed services throughout the community. Social work and substance abuse professionals were added. Service hours were increased to cover 6 a.m. through 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday, and additional staffing was approved. The HOT team visited 15 or more locations weekly and assisted approximately 55 people per week who were experiencing homelessness. Since last April, they had more than 2,000 interactions. More than $2.7 million of annual and ERIS funds were invested in programs and services to prevent eviction, increase housing stability, and rapidly rehouse homeless persons and families. This included supporting the geographically targeted homeless outreach project on Monroe Center, in which community builders partnered with the city. They engaged 51 unsheltered residents, and to date, 38 have been connected to a permanent housing resource, 25 are in temporary housing, and 10 have been moved into permanent housing. Through the annual Community Development Block Grant investments, 12 neighborhood organizations performed a variety of activities related to leadership and civic engagement, including addressing code violations that resulted in 96 cases being resolved before enforcement actually began. Through our housing rehabilitation office, 26 housing units were made lead safe, and another 22 units received improvements of rehabilitation. The remainder of the fiscal year will focus on deploying an additional HOT team in March to allow 2 teams to be on duty daily, Monday through Friday. We'll continue to work on dashboards to highlight spending and outcomes of the IRIS investments. And we'll help facilitate deployment of emergency rental funds coming into to the community from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. It's anticipated that $38.5 million will be provided, with $35 million of that specifically for financial assistance to prevent eviction for city and county tenants. And the Housing Rehabilitation Office will strive to complete another 40 projects. Next slide, please. Finally, we are continuing to work on dashboards related to housing and homelessness metrics. Mr. Washington shared this slide this morning that illustrates the number of persons experiencing homelessness that became stably housed. It's important to note that this particular metric is specific to the city's annual investment of emergency solution grants funds, and that the dashboard will also provide system-wide data. This concludes our presentation, and Ryan and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, both Ms. Bohach and Mr. Kilpatrick. I'll start with just 2 questions. Connie, can you tell us, I've been following and I'm aware of the funds that have been allocated for the emergency rental assistance and eviction prevention. And I know we decisioned to do that in partnership at the county level. Can you talk to us a little bit about timeline and what the plan is to make sure that those funds are available when families need them? I know all of us are really concerned about families who are currently behind on their rent and what will happen when the eviction moratorium is lifted. And then my second question is related to the work we've done around lead poisoning. I know pre-COVID, we had a pretty aggressive plan that came out of both our city task force as well as the new action team that we created in partnership with the county. I've talked to Chair Bolter and the plan to move forward on some of that work in the next couple months, but I'm curious, some of the recommendations that were specific to the city, you know, regarding the pilot project and really being more aggressive with screening, you know, where are we on that? And is that on our to-do list as well?
So in relation to, or in regard to the emergency rental assistance funds, so that is from the U.S. Treasury that goes directly to the state. The state legislature has to approve those funds and appropriate them. So the community is really waiting for MISTA at this point in order to get the, actually receive the award. And as you indicated, Mayor, it is for all of Kent County. So it's the city and Kent County. So it's the geography, not us as entities or organizations. And those funds will come in through our continuum of care and process. Agencies have been working to make sure that they are prepared and ready to do the work. It will require some significant increases in staffing to be able to support that. And it's my understanding that MISTA is also launching their own application, online application process that we will be able to, that all recipients will use. So there's some integration there that we'll be working on. I don't have a definitive date for you in terms of when that will happen, but I will certainly keep you updated as we learn more information. In regard to the lead, in terms of the lead project or the pilot, what was proposed to update the city's property maintenance code to ensure that there is inspections that happen for the rental certification program related to lead. We are still working through that, looking at that. We have been in contact with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, who has provided us some information related to the approach that we were originally envisioning. And that was the model that was used by Rochester, New York, where it was just a dust wipe sample. And there appears to be some concerns about that approach because there is not a full risk assessment that is a result of that process. So we are continuing to work through that and figure out what alternatives there may be.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could jump in quick, because Commissioner Lanier and I met on Monday with Kent County Community Action, and Susan gave us a little update on the eviction prevention program as well. Again, like Ms. Bohach said, the number has not been approved yet, but I believe the number that Kent County has requested for that program is about $37 million. And the team that Connie referenced has a goal in place to be ready to accept applications on March the 15th, so that when the eviction ban is lifted on the 31st, if it's lifted, that we'll be ready. So that was good. It was good to hear that there's been a lot of work done on that in preparation of what all of us are worrying about. And again, maybe that'll get extended, but that's what we learned on Monday from Susan Cervantes.
Thanks for sharing that, Commissioner.
And there is, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add, and there is continued national advocacy around extension of the moratorium.
Yeah, thank you. I know we are adding our voice to those efforts. All right, I'll open it up for other questions and comments, commissioners. All right, I don't see any. It was pretty thorough, very detailed. Commissioner Ruppert, and then
yeah, thank you. I'm just going to say that I love all this. I'm so excited for the work that you all have done. Looking forward to making all this stuff happen, as well as some of the state legislative agenda that we're working on together. And that'll hopefully then free up some additional tools for us locally. So thank you to Ryan and to Connie for your work and your teams. And it's very, very exciting. I'm looking at our goal for 2021 is 1,100 units of housing built and 500 of them being affordable. So that would exceed your graph that we saw. So we'll continue to hope that we can exceed that. But it is nice to see that projection about when we can kind of return to pre-COVID levels of construction. That's really helpful information.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I know all of us are hopeful that with some of those text amendments that we recently made with allowing ground floor residential, that we'll start to see some of those units converted, which obviously doesn't take the amount of capital or time required in those larger projects. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some of those units come available as well. Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Kilpatrick and Ms. Bohach for the presentation. I want to just state my support as we continue to move forward to try to grow the Affordable Housing Fund, and really want to, I think more than anything, put a challenge out there. Really, what is it that I would love to really understand? All of the dynamics that continue to, I guess, stand in the way of us being able to create more housing. Now, again, I understand everything from construction costs to materials, but if there was some sort of document, something that could be created that would give us a very clear understanding of what's standing to create more mixed income housing communities. I still believe that's the answer based on the research that I've seen. And it's not about trying to create affordable housing and put it in areas that are already low income. It's about trying to, again, scatter it or have it include, housing that's not low income as well. And so I would just love to get an idea of everything that we can do. Perhaps we can have more robust conversations with local banks. Is there a role that banks can play? I know that we've mentioned philanthropy and the potential of them kicking into the fund, but there has to be more. I think we have to, operate at the highest level in terms of being very innovative and trying to find a solution to create more housing units. And in my opinion, it has to be more than just the rental units, which I know, again, that gets to being able to, meet the demand, so to speak. But we all know, we know about the data that speaks to wealth creation around home ownership. And so the opportunity to create single family homes, whether it's townhouses or something, if we can just, again, that would be my challenge today, is if we can develop some sort of document that would give us a very clear understanding of what's standing in the way of us being able to create more housing units in a very, very significant way.
I think that's a great challenge, and I think we'd be happy to do that work. I'll consult with City Manager Washington about how we might go about putting together a very succinct but thorough evaluation of what the barriers are and the potential opportunities to overcome those barriers.
Thank you. All right,
one thing I want to mention is, if I could, Mayor, one thing I want to mention is if we need wood, I know that Commissioner Long has a lot of trees in his yard, so he could probably help with the construction of a couple of homes based on the trees in his yard. So I just wanted to make that clear.
No, Commissioner, we want trees. We want to plant more trees, not cut them down, at least in the city. All right, Commissioners, any final questions or comments for Ms. Bohat or Mr. Kilpatrick? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and finish up that briefing. City Manager, anything to add before I turn to our City Clerk to see if we have anyone who wishes to make public comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Commissioners. I do want to acknowledge, I feel to acknowledge Josh Naramore and his contribution to the public safety presentation. So I want to thank Mobile GR for their collaboration and innovation as well, and helping to do some of the things that the police department has aspired to do. I hope you'll see from today that there are a lot of moving pieces in this organization, things that continue to get done that we have to prioritize in the midst of a pandemic. It is my hope that we can continue to work on many of these initiatives. If we did ask you to make one decision today, because this was an update, but there are going to be, depending on what happens with our funding issues, there may be projects or things that you saw today that we may be able to press forward with. There may be other things that we will have to pause, and there may be others that we might have to push or punt. And those are going to be the tough conversations. And if I were to ask many of you those choices today, many of you would like, we want it all to continue. So do we. So I think over the next couple of months, we will begin factoring in both what our capability is, resources, as well as outcomes, and to make sure that by the time we propose the budget on April 27th, the ideal case would be a continuation budget, that we continue to do these great things that we showed you between now and the end of June, because many of them will have to continue on beyond June 30th. They'll be part of fiscal year 22. So thank you again for your time and feedback today.
Thank you, City Manager. I appreciate that reminder, even though I'm cautiously optimistic. So we'll turn it now to public comment. So again, if you would like to be heard, you can call 311 and hit number 1. Joel, City Clerk, do we have anyone in the queue?
I'm not sure yet, because we kind of just broadcast to the people that queue is open. We didn't leave it open for 2 to 3 hours. We don't want people sitting there for that long. So we do have Mr. Surreal, I hope I pronounced that right, to interpret if someone needs interpretation. So I think we should give it about 20 seconds just to see if anybody gets in. That's kind of our delay between our other formats.
Okay, all right, sounds good. And I'll take this time then to thank my colleagues. It's been a long day, and we have a long night tonight as well with our 7 o'clock meeting. Hopefully all of you feel impressed and happy with the time that we've spent together as we've received these really important updates from our entire team. So thank you for your continued service and hard work.
So Daniel, is there anybody in the queue?
There are no callers.
Let me see if anybody's yelling in Facebook or. I don't see anybody. I think we're all set, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, City Clerk. We'll go ahead then and adjourn this meeting, and we'll be back together tonight at 7. Commissioners, just one FYI. I have asked our attorney and our Parks Director if we can go ahead and combine our public hearings tonight, since those all 3 are related to grant applications for MD&R Trust Fund. So obviously for 3 separate projects. So tonight I'll have our Parks Director speak on all 3 of those, and then we'll open up public comment or the public hearing related to all 3 of those at the same time. So just an FYI on that, so you're not surprised tonight. So with that, I hope you get a little bit of a break and have a chance to get some fresh air, and I'll see you back tonight at 7 p.m.